Welcome inside. Second edition of the Scores Table. Brian Henson, Josh Sable, Danny Rego, Courtney Dulks with you here talking some girls basketball for the second week. They decided to bring us back, which is nice. How's everybody doing?
Very good.
We got a lot of ground to cover, not a ton of time to do it, so let's just jump right in. There's one game that I wanted to talk about from last week, and that was Norwell beating Columbia City. First loss of the season for Columbia City. Norwell 9-2. They're a force, looks like, in 3A. Kennedy Felling had a big fourth quarter. Mackenzie Feast had a big game. Danny, I'll start with you since we touched on it briefly before we started, but what a win for Norwell.
Yeah, that's a really good win. And if you go back and watch like highlights or go back and watch the game or any of the reports and you saw anyone, what an incredible environment for girls basketball. I mean, it didn't just look like, a boys crowd it looked like it was the place to be with the barbershop and everything closed in town and everybody was there. I thought it was awesome. Two really good basketball teams. Congrats to Norwell. From a Columbia City perspective, I mean, we've given them a lot of sound for how great they were. My big take home from that basketball game was they shot 46% from the free throw line and 12% from three in the game. So one might say, well, that's why they got beat. But at the same time, the formula for Columbia City is there. I mean, I think we know what it takes for them to win. They only gave up 45 points to Norwell. It was very difficult to score in that basketball game. Even the last possession, I think they got exactly what they wanted with just a Baxter downhill attack. She got 2 feet into the paint. But it was just tough. There was always hands moving. There was always balls deflecting. It was just really difficult to get points. But when you shoot 12% from three when you're Columbia City, I think it's probably going to be very difficult to win basketball games. And the 46% from the line, I think, is a really telling statistic. So, I think we celebrated how good of a defensive basketball team they were. But I think that's going to be the one Achilles heel that we'll watch is, can they win a close basketball game in which they aren't shooting well? Because I did think that they shot really well against HSE, particularly Sheets. I think and Tonkel. I think both of those kids had big threes. But what a great basketball game! Congratulations to those two teams up there and Norwell. I know Feast just. The text that I got the only singular text I got was Feast had a great first half and just got them going. And I think got them loose and got them to believe that they can win a basketball game like that. And in an environment like that stuff matters early. So congrats to Norwell.
Yeah. And I just to add on to that, I like the way Norwell goes about their business. They're not afraid to play anyone. They played HSC. They're playing LN coming up. On Sagarin, they have the 20th toughest schedule in the state. And not a lot of 3A schools do that. You'll see 3A schools finish 20, 3-3, or, they'll make a run, but then they'll have the 250th strength of schedule. Norwell is afraid of no one. So they got that big game coming up, I know, against LN. And I think Columbia City is going to be fine. They got a couple games coming up, but then they have the Hall of Fame in 2 weeks. So no better way to get back on track than trying to go out and win the Hall of Fame.
I personally have a lot of connections with Norwell and have seen them as a player, but also I've been up there and trained their program. And Coach Thornton's been there for, I think it's his 26th year. So over 25 years with the program. And last week on here, I talked about how the North there, I see girls not playing as much basketball, but Norwell's different. And I went there in the spring a few years ago and did their feeder program. And there was 50 kids in the girls basketball players in the gym, from the younger ones to older ones, just working on their game. And it shows. And that school is girls basketball is their thing. And I hope that they make a far run this year.
It's cool too, Josh. You mentioned the atmosphere there, and it was. Looking at the video highlights online, it was packed to the rafters, which is always awesome to see. And it's becoming more the norm. But even so, girls basketball, it's cool to see. It felt like last year's kind of hit or miss, but when it hit, it hit the other night. It's unreal, and it's a lot of fun to be a part of that.
Absolutely.
Norwell has historical significance too. I mean, Courtney, you won Miss Basketball in 2010. 2 years later, Jessica Rupright, who ended up playing her college basketball or starting her college career at Miami of Ohio, won Miss Basketball in 2012. And I think it's just three Miss Basketballs, I think, in the last 15 years have come out of a school that isn't a 4A school. Norwell has one of them. So this isn't brand new news, particularly to the people in that area, that Norwell is able to knock off the number one team in the state.
Yeah. Another game that's going to be bringing a big atmosphere and a big one every year is the Mudsock game this weekend between Fishers and Hamilton Southeastern. HSE comes in 10-1, Fishers 9-3. Fishers had the big win Friday over Noblesville, where they scored 79 points, which is the most in, I think, over a decade. HSE's continued to roll. Fishers avoided a trap game last night against Pendleton Heights. Josh, we'll start with you this time, and just what do you make of this year's Mudsock matchup?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's going to be a great matchup. Both these teams obviously are top 10 teams. They play really difficult schedules. Harris and Smith are fantastic for Fishers, and obviously McAlusky and Sidham are great for HSC. I honestly think it's going to come down to what's KK's status. If she's healthy, as Courtney and Danny will tell you, like, guards win games. So if KK's healthy, I think I'd give the slight edge to HSC in this matchup. I think John Harrell has it like a 5-point spread. So I definitely like HSC, but it also, once again, it goes back to what's KK's health, what's her availability. And I think that'll be a determining factor in this game.
I think what's most interesting in this basketball game for me is Fishers is a difficult team to evaluate because they've gone through two, I think, almost an identity crisis. Let's not forget that just 10 months ago, this was the basketball team that came out of the North and represented the North side of the state in the state championship. And how is that basketball team, when you return to Leah Harris, when you have talents like Nevaeh Dickman and Allison Choi and Kate Thomas and kids that played major roles in that run? It's interesting how they're under the radar. And I'll revert back to a conversation that I had with Coach Lauren Votaw. It was about 2-3 weeks before the season. There was a youth league that was going on at Fishers, and we've gotten to be pretty good friends over the years. And she was talking about how she was almost questioning her own team's toughness. Now, it's not an indictment to the kids that she has on the roster, but I felt like early in the year, I think they tried to be who they were last year. And I say it's not an indictment on the current roster that they have. It's more of a compliment of Haley and Olivia Smith, who are now at Ball State playing their college basketball. But that's who they were. They were the really aggressive, hard-nosed, clap in your face, do a little bit of chirping kind of basketball team. And I've talked to a lot of people that were close to that program, and it seemed like that's who they were trying to be at the beginning of the year. I mean, they have offensive outputs. They had a 4-game stretch where they scored 51 points, 46 points, 27 points, and 40 points. So that's 41 points per basketball game. Their last 3 games, they're averaging 72 points per game. I mean, Hank talked about the 79 that they put up against Noblesville, but they also had big outputs in the other 2 basketball games. I think both of them in the 70s. So I think in this basketball game, which Fishers team shows up? Is it the artistic one where you have Talia Harris, who's really a difficult player to stay in front of and can create? I also feel like in that Noblesville game, particularly outside of the individual creation that Talia Harris had in that basketball game, I thought they assisted a lot of their shots. And then the final point here, before we throw it over to Courtney, I think the depth. Lauren always talks about the depth. She feels like she's deeper than HSE. She feels like Fishers is deeper than Noblesville. And she thinks that if she can get the game into their bench, that's going to be a big positive, a big positive mark for Fishers in any basketball game. And that showed up in the Noblesville game. Nevaeh Dickman, who's a key basketball player for them, 3-level scorer, was great against Pendleton Heights last night. I was watching that one on stream. She goes to the bench with her second foul very early, and Morgan Roberts comes into the basketball game and hits 2 threes in the first quarter. So there wasn't that much of a fall off. I think that's going to be an interesting thing, is to see if Lauren can get this game into the bench. So something to look out for.
It's interesting too with Fishers that they don't have to beat you with the high scoring game. Like we saw it all through last year. Like they're a team that's comfortable. And even this year, I know it's kind of been an outlier the past few weeks, but it's a team that's comfortable scoring, around 50 or so points a game, because they're just so good defensively and they're just such a hard-nosed team. And even though the Smith twins are gone, and I think they kind of set the tone to an extent of just that physical blue-collar, rough and tumble style of play that Fishers has had the past 2 years, I think that it's still carried over, with players like Allison Choi, Talia Harris, and all the kids that you mentioned, Danny. And I think, too, we saw it against Noblesville. Maybe I'm putting too much into it, but I think that the fact that Fishers has a post player in Dickman, I think that's going to give them the same type of advantage that Noblesville had with Cece Quigley. And I'm interested to see how much of a role she plays in this. I think that, if they can get her rolling inside, that's one potential weak spot, it seems like, for HSE, is that they don't really have that one big post you can really match up consistently, it seems like, at least, with some of those posts. So maybe that's an area that Fishers can exploit. And then on the other side of it, too, HSE may have the overall lead in this series, but they've lost 7 straight in here. So it'll be interesting to see. It feels like a kind of coin flip game there.
I think a point of emphasis too, in streaming that game last night, there was, and look, I try to watch these basketball games to try to see things in a different light. Kaycie Warfel, and we'll talk about her later in the pod because she has been outstanding and relentless in scoring the basketball. There were a couple of possessions late in that basketball game where Jordan Smith or Joe Buckets was face guarding Kaycie Warfel in quarter court. I just wonder if that was some sort of practice for what they're going to do against HSE. And I don't look, Lauren never said anything to me. And it'll be interesting to see. Coach Satterfield will really have to channel his boys' experience in coaching with Gary Harris and Zach Irvin. And when he started to see a lot of that face guard stuff, that I think the formula for HSE is out there. They're going to try to get 25 to 30 from Maya. They're going to try to get 15 to 20 from Stidham. Holman's effect on a basketball game isn't measured statistically. And then they're going to try to get, spot production from their role players. It's interesting to see if they do something where they take a kid like Jordan Smith and just have her follow around Maya.
Yeah, that's interesting. We can circle back a little bit maybe to the HSE Mudsock game a little bit later in the show, but the main topic today, and the one that I wanted to discuss while Courtney's still with us too, is just we're at December 12th as we record this, and we are already halfway through the season for most teams. I know that it's not a topic that's been talked about a lot, but to me, when I look at that, and I've been thinking about this a lot, it's kind of stupid to be quite blunt about it. And when you get to February, it feels even more weird, where as other seasons are starting to ramp up, like on the boys' side and the college game, and things are really starting to heat up, the girls' season in Indiana is officially winding down. Courtney, I'll start with you because you played your championship games. You guys were into March already then, but you've been involved on the coaching side with this current format where things are wrapping up earlier. So I'll throw the ball to you and let you open up remarks and thoughts on this topic.
Yeah, I'll catch that ball and take off this one because I do not like the state being in February at all. I experienced as a player, we played our state finals. I know my junior year was on March 7th, 2009. And I've experienced it as a head coach. I coached for a head coach at Marion High School for a year in 2016-17. And when it just did not feel like tournament time when the tournament was going on so early. And if you look around at other states, all their tournaments are later on. So why does Indiana do it? They're trying to, offset interfering with the guys' tournament and things. But I think I'm going to speak up for the women, and it's doing a disservice to the girls. Let March Madness be March Madness. Don't make it February Madness. That does not make sense to me.
Yeah, I suppose, and Danny, Josh, you obviously welcome to jump in, but I suppose that the argument is that you're trying to keep the girls away from the boys and give them the spotlight on their own, which in itself and on the surface is admirable and cool, I guess. But it's kind of like robbing Peter to pay Paul to an extent. I feel like, Josh, what do you think?
Yeah, I think as coaches, we were talking about this before we went on air, I was looking at some of the schedules, and there are some teams right now that once you get to Christmas, there's only 6 games left. So now as a coach, you have to be really creative with your practices. Like I remember, when I was coaching at Franklin, we always had these weird lulls where you might play 3 games in 1 week, but then you don't play for 8 or 9 days. So now you're asking yourself okay, what do we need? Do we need a day off? Do we need treatment? Do we need to ramp up conditioning to make sure we stay in shape? Because we always like to get up and down. We brought in boys just to keep the girls, sharp. So you're always, as a coach, you're always thinking about okay, how are we going to be playing our best basketball during the tournament? So as a coach, you're always navigating those things, making sure that your team is ready to play.
I think from an AAU perspective, Indiana always ends up waiting. It's very commonplace now where you have kids from bordering states. That's just, it's in the culture of AAU now. Kentucky kids playing Indiana, Indiana kids playing Ohio, Michigan kids playing Illinois. It's just all over the place. There's a 3-week or almost 4-week lag before any of the AAU coaches can really get their hands on the Kentucky kids or the Ohio kids. So we do it differently. That I bring up that point to illustrate that it is moved up. In the spirit of devil's advocacy, look, Halloween for me is the begin. It's not, it's not what it should be, which is, my kids in handy manny costumes and things like that. It's the start of girls basketball. I think the only gripe that I would have is that you have to wait on the soccer players. You got to wait on the volleyball players. I think the most notable example in this area is Meredith Tipner. They are always, not always, but I think they've won 2 state championships and going to be favorites to win a third. And Noblesville has to wait for her to adjust. I don't know how much you can implement there, but it is nice to have early basketball games without the boys start. I don't think the boys start till right around Thanksgiving. So there is that whole 3-week span there where the girls just have the stage. So in the spirit of devil's advocacy, maybe it's a week early.
Yeah, and too, that applies also though to Roncalli with the volleyball team where they have, I wrote about this the other day, I think 3 or 4 key players who play volleyball too. And when the team goes to semi-state the way they did, those girls aren't able to join the team until, after the season's already started for basically everybody else. So that puts them at a deficit. And two, that brings up another good point, Danny, in that what's wrong with giving a buffer between fall sports and the start of basketball season? Courtney, you were a multi-sport athlete, weren't you?
Yeah, I played soccer and did track. So
yeah, I feel like it, from a health standpoint to some extent, maybe even a mental health standpoint to a little bit, it may be useful just to give the kids a week or 2, between there. And obviously some kids get that because the soccer season is another bag of worms or whatever the saying is. But there's not a lot of recovery time in there. And I think to some extent too, it probably impacts the level of play and the caliber of play, especially through, those 3 weeks when the girls season does have the stage to themselves.
I'll tell you, I ran cross country my freshman year, went to semi-states individuals, was a pretty good runner, and did soccer. There is nothing like getting into basketball shape. You just got to play basketball. No matter if I came in as a cross country runner, as a soccer, you just got to play. It's different. You just got to get your minutes in because, basketball, you're running, you're jumping, you're doing all the things. It's a different type of conditioning. And those of you who play basketball understand what I'm saying. So it takes a while no matter what. You got to get into basketball practice and you got to start doing basketball things to get in shape.
Yeah, and as a high school coach, I was never worried about players like Courtney because those girls are killers and they're going to be ready to play. But I did worry about kids. Okay, are they going to be tired? Are they coming from fall sports? Volleyball sectionals ends on a Saturday. Basketball practice starts on a Monday, and you're playing all summer. You have workouts. You have AAU. So yeah, in basketball is a long season. So I was definitely worried about more the mental side of it. Are they going to be rejuvenated and ready for the season, or are they going to be man, I had one day, to relax before, basketball starts.
Well, there's a freshman at Roncalli by the name of Elliot Leffler who played on the Roncalli volleyball team, like Hank was talking about. And she told me that for the month leading up to the season, she would do all of her basketball workouts in the morning. She'd then go to school and then go to volleyball. That's a lot. And this is a freshman, and she's never played a varsity basketball game before to this point, coupled with the fact, too, that Roncalli was really good at volleyball. And so, look, if I'm the volleyball coach, I'm not going to be particularly thrilled that, one of my key players is waking up at 5 a.m. to get 90 minutes of shots up. So I do think that, Hank, you bring up a good point that it could lead to burnout. When we have kids like Leffler and Tipner on the show, I mean, we'll just have to remember to ask them.
Yeah. Well, Lydia Staley, too, played a key role on the volleyball team. Now she's starting. She played varsity and was part of that semi-state run. And if they would have gone a week later, they would have been in November, which, Roncalli stood a very good chance of doing. And you can speak to that. Josh, I suppose this question for you, because Sophie plays volleyball as well at Center Grove. Would moving the season, starting it later or earlier, wrapping it up in March, how would that impact for kids who do play volleyball? Would that start to run into club volleyball?
Definitely. I mean, just like what Danny was saying, club volleyball is very similar. Once you get into the weekend of regionals, a lot of your big clubs, they've already started. Whether it's workouts or whether it's team practices, and then once the state finals hits, you've already had probably 3 or 4 practices by that time. So, so like you said, like if you do that with the schedule, then it's just going to delay, the club schedule.
And I mean, that feeds into it, I guess, the specialization side of things and how, forcing kids to choose sort of those unintended consequences, I suppose. In terms of solutions, for me, as I look at it, I think it would make sense to start the girls' season a few weeks later and then begin the playoffs maybe a week or two before the boys, so that's a little more staggered, but still goes into March maybe. So you're wrapping up, you have semi-state and then state maybe the first 2 weeks of March, then you have the boys right after, or however it's set up. Obviously, that's stripping it of all the logistics, renting out facilities and whatnot. But if you guys had your druthers, how would you construct a season? When would it run? When would it end? Where would you play the games?
And I don't know how you do this, but I almost like, you have your moratorium in July. I would almost like to see a moratorium between the seasons.
Yeah.
So that way everyone can just, recharge the batteries a little bit. Now, obviously, if you're going to a state championship or even a semi-state, like those kids, probably aren't going to get much of a break. But, if you're out, in volleyball sectionals or regional sectionals, or regional, you still might have, some time. And I do think you would have more multi-sport athletes playing and you would avoid burnout if there was a little bit more of a break in between.
I think it takes away the question mark too, because a lot of schools now have fall breaks for a week or 2 weeks, and that a lot of times lines up with when girls' tryouts are. Obviously, your studs are going to make the team, but those middle of the road, it gives, if you put a moratorium there, which is going to fall probably in a fall break, it gives families that freedom to go spend time as a family, go on a vacation. Family time is so important, and it takes that pressure off of thinking we have to be there for this time. And at the same time, people have to get so many practices in before you can play in a game. And so people coming from fall sports and to get their amount of practices, they almost have to be at the tryout time in those first weeks of practice. So I think it takes all that away. I agree with Josh. Moratorium in between seasons solves so many headaches for everybody.
5 or 6 years ago, girls basketball tryouts was the same day as the first day of fall break. I remember I had parents that were fuming because for so long it's been, we go on fall break. So yeah, there were 2 seasons there where the schedule was that girls basketball tryouts started on the same day as fall break. Now they haven't done that the last 3 or 4 years, but I remember those 2 years were tough because, we're starting on the date. I can't help that it's, on fall break. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like there's gonna be fall break this year.
And it does. It puts the coaches in a tough spot because, I mean, you don't want to be the, jerk who says, no, you can't go out with your family. And it puts a family in a tough spot because you don't want to be the one who robs your kid of this opportunity. But at the same time, for you, like you said, I mean, those 4 years go by really fast. Then your kid's going off to college and they're growing up. So this is kind of like the last little window, especially as a senior.
It's tough.
Little window of family time. It's an impossible.
When I was a head coach, I missed out on a trip to Sanibel Island with my husband's family. Because I took the job and we already had it all scheduled, and we had to back out. Jordan and I did, which was hard to do, but that was the week when tryouts were. But where I was at, we already knew who was going to be on the team, so like to be able to push that back, like it would have been nice.
Yeah.
I think I'm attracted to the idea that you said, Hank, about staggering the state championships too. That's an interesting concept. Obviously, the financial component and renting facilities, like you had already said, so at the risk of redundancy. But I want to go to all of the games. Like I want to go to the Class A state championship. I want to go to the 2A, the 3A. It just makes for a long day on Saturday to sit there. Now you can turn it on. They do a good job of streaming those games. Obviously they're on TV, but being there is different, and to feel the energy and to feel the pressure and in seeing that. So I'm attracted to that idea. If there's a way where you could give each of the 4 classes respectively a primetime slot, that might be pretty cool to see.
That's interesting, and that's a good topic to pivot to off of this. Sort of an offshoot is the state championships, because that's something that we talked about before. Because obviously we don't live inside a vacuum. There's other factors like renting out Gainbridge Fieldhouse, which is, I'm sure, tons of money, coordinating schedules with the Pacers and other concerts and events that may prevent a team from practicing in the arena before their state championship game, as somebody on this call is familiar with. But I guess 2 things. One is I wouldn't mind seeing these played at like Hinkle Fieldhouse or a more intimate arena personally. I understand the pop and the circumstance of playing in the same building as the Pacers and the Fever is really cool. And then, Danny, you bring up an interesting point too of, in a perfect world, maybe splitting these off over 2 days, a Friday night, late afternoon, primetime slot or something like that, for 2 classes, and then the other 2 classes go on Saturday around the same time. I don't mind them being crunched together on Saturday, but a game at 11 a.m. or whenever the first one is doesn't have quite the same feel as, a state championship game maybe should. So I'll throw it to you 3 and just your thoughts on structuring a state championship weekend.
Well, one of my really good friends, guy by the name of Doug Gardner, his dad was a commissioner for the IHSAA, and they like the product of the downtown kind of day. And so I get that. And there's a lot of pageantry that comes with coming to Indianapolis and filling up Gainbridge Fieldhouse. But if you put that Norwell Columbia City basketball game in Gainbridge Fieldhouse and take it out of Columbia City's gym, that's not near the environment. And so I guess a smaller venue, I think would in a standalone primetime spot on a standalone day, I think is a really attractive product for girls. And I'm all for it if there's a way to make it work.
Yeah, I've played our state championships. My first one was in Gainbridge. The second one was at Lucas Oil Stadium. And that primetime game that night was Ben Davis versus South Bend, Washington, 1 versus 2 in the nation, Alex Bentley and co versus Skylar Diggins and co. And so, but even that game, and then our game we played against Heritage Christian was the big matchup. Like you take that, like Danny said, I would have loved to have played those games in a smaller venue for the girls, for absolutely 100%, because the crowd and the energy, like there were a lot of people there at the Lucas Oil Stadium, but the court is elevated up and the fans seem so far away that whether or not the fans had an impact on the game, like it was just different than a typical game would be. It was a great shooting arena. I loved it because the lights were great there, but I'm agree with Danny, and I would love to see, I don't know how many people, the Coliseum where the Fever played at for a little bit, where the State Fairgrounds, how many that holds, because you could still have the downtown feel, stay there, then travel over. I don't know where the spot is, but I think a smaller arena for sure.
Real quickly, Courtney, 1, why did they play it at Lucas Oil that year? And 2, what was it like playing in Gainbridge?
I think it might have been the Big Ten tournament, or there was a conflict that was going on. I forget what it was. And then playing in Gainbridge, that's one of my favorite arenas to play in to this day. It's where we always had the Big Ten tournament a few times. It's a great place to play. It's still, for a state finals girls game, I think it's too big. But
I think,
the rims are still 10 foot tall no matter where you're at. So you just got to show up and play. But for the whole atmosphere, I would change it.
Yeah, I mean, and I said this, I think on another pod, like coaches, they want to practice and prepare for everything. So, if you're going to do a regional, like we would always do something during the season, a tournament where you can replicate a regional atmosphere. So you play your first game, then we would go to a hotel, the girls would eat, but then our managers and the coaches, we would also rent out a ballroom, and we would put down the lane lines and the free throw line, the 3-point line, and we're going over all of our stuff to get ready for that second game. Same thing for semi-state. They give you a day to go to the gym and have a practice. So you get used to the backdrops, you get used to the facilities, the locker rooms. When we played at Bankers Life, we weren't given that opportunity. Okay. I think there was like a Jonas Brothers concert going on that week. That's why we lost. It was the freaking Jonas Brothers. That's why we lost. Ashland's Shade had nothing to do with it. It was all the Jonas Brothers. But yeah, I mean, I think you want to play in an atmosphere where it feels like the crowd is on top of you. It's maybe a smaller venue. Everyone's loud, and it's a little bit tougher when you're playing in those like spacious environments like Lucas Oil or Gamebridge. So yeah, I would definitely like to see it more in a venue where it feels like a big time game.
Hinkle Fieldhouse seems like it would kind of fit that billing. I've never seen a basketball game there, but I'm familiar with it. I've covered events there, and it seems like that would kind of fit the billing of a big game feel, but still an intimate environment. And I suppose for the players, that's kind of the big draw of getting to the state finals. You get to play in that Gamebridge Fieldhouse, big game environment. But
if we only lived in a state that had 14 of the 15 biggest high school gyms in the country,
yeah.
Is Danny vouching for Newcastle?
Well, it's any Southport. I mean,
hey, listen,
basketball's an intimate game, right?
Don't say Newcastle around people from Seymour. They'll get after you. Seymour people will claim that they have the biggest, not Newcastle.
Huh? I haven't been down to Seymour, but I'll put it on the list, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I suppose it's probably not going to change, as similar to the discussion last week about the shot clock, discussions that we'll have in the future about sectionals and seating and all that stuff. But it's interesting food for thought, especially as we hit the midway point, back half of a season on December 12th, coming up on Christmas, and things are already starting to ramp up for the playoffs, this early in the winter. It's interesting. Courtney, you needed to bolt at 4:10, correct?
I got about 4 or 5 more minutes. I got to take my little one to dance class. So.
Okay. Well, you get to choose the topic then for the last 4 to 5 minutes, or you can jump off early, whichever you would like to do.
All right, I will choose the topic. I got the shirt on for it. Fever getting the #1 pick. I'm going to go away from high school girls basketball, but talk about the Fever winning the lottery. It's still girls basketball in Indiana. And talk about, does Caitlin Clark stay or go at Iowa for her 5th year? So I want to hear your guys' take first, and then I have my thoughts, and then I'll have to peace out here in a second.
Well, I'll keep it short. I told Danny this when we and Hank when we started, but for me, if you have Tyrese Halliburton and you have Caitlin Clark for the next 10 years, Indiana fans are the most knowledgeable basketball fans in the country. Like, this could be a basketball renaissance if she decides to come out for the WNBA draft. Like, Pacers and Fever the next 10 years could be amazing. The one little bit of research that I did do that gave me some pause was I saw that Aaliyah Boston last year, her contract, her first year for the Fever was like $72,000. And Caitlin Clark, obviously, right now is making way more money than that. So that would be my only concern.
Well, I got to, this is total name drop, and this will
come
come across intolerable.
Hey, listen, name drop is what we do on this show, and mispronounce names. That's our thing.
Well, there's a group called the Blue Star 30s. There's a circuit called Blue Star, and they used to have this class of 30 kids nationally, and it used to be run by some guy out in Philadelphia. And Sydney Parrish was in the inaugural class of the Blue Star 30s along with Caitlin Clark. and coaching, coached against Kate a lot of times and got to know her pretty well. And here's the name drop part of it. There's actually some light texting that was going on between me and Kate when the Fever won it. I will say this, okay, probably a little too close to really say everything that was said, but this is a perfect market for her. So Captain Obvious over here in the bottom left-hand corner is going to say, this is a perfect market. And we will invite that. We need that. She's a transcendent talent, but more than that, this is a market that's starved for a kid, and it seems to be a perfect marriage. If it does work out where she comes, there's going to be Kate Clark jerseys everywhere. I think people will get behind it. So, I hope she does. I hope she finds her path. If this is where home is for her, we'll welcome her with open arms. So, Courtney, in your last few minutes, take us home.
Yeah, Grace Berger, who played at IU, was a rookie for the Fever. I think she said it best that Caitlin Clark is a generational player. And you don't really know how good a player is unless you're on the court playing against them. And Grace talked about when they were battling out in the Big Ten, IU and Iowa, how good Caitlin Clark is, how hard she is to guard. She's a generational player. The generational player that I played against when I was in college was Maya Moore. You don't really know how good Maya Moore is until you're on the court with her. And she's a player that a lot of people, because she's retired now, aren't going to see play. But she was an amazing player. But back to Caitlin. Shout out to Santa Claus first. Like, Santa, if you're listening, I want an Iowa Caitlin Clark jersey for Christmas because she's generational. And next year, I hope I'm saying, Santa, I want an Indiana Fever Caitlin Clark jersey. Like, Danny said it best. This is the best market for her to come to. It's in Indiana. I listened to one of her interviews. She said she's going to go with her gut and making a decision. She just signed with Gatorade. She's one of 4 college players. So her and Paige Buckers, and then 2 football player from Colorado, football player from somewhere out on the East Coast. So she has all the NIL backing. So, like, I think Stephanie White also said it best. Is Caitlin Clark getting bored with college basketball? Like, does she need to be challenged? I think she needs to be challenged. She needs to make the move. Whether or not she does, she's going to go with her gut. But on my Christmas list, I hope that she does.
Good stuff from Courtney Delix. Courtney, thanks for stopping by today. We'll be back next week with you.
Hey, can't wait to be back with you guys. We'll see y'all.
Bye, Courtney.
Danny and Josh, we still have some games to discuss, some things on the list to get to today. Obviously, just wanted to get to sort of the main show topics. Let's start with a game that's coming up on Thursday that's of some interest. Bedford North Lawrence hosting Silver Creek. A lot of star power in that game with Wren, Schoen, Wright, Grant for Silver Creek. Obviously, Chloe Spreen at BNL, and lots of pieces over there. Madison Bailey, Cheryl over there. Silver Creek is coming off a loss to Floyd Central last Thursday. Bit of a surprise. Bedford North Lawrence beat Brownsburg. Good win for them. I was curious to see how they'd stack up against the Bulldogs, and they seem to fare pretty well just based off the updates I saw on Twitter. Danny, I'll start with you. What do you make of this game coming up on Thursday?
Well, getting to know Scott Chain pretty well over the last few months, he's going to put individual game plans in per game. And I think Bedford North Lawrence knows who they are. Okay. I think they knew who they were going into the season. I think that's been confirmed through the first half of their season. They're a Spreen-centric basketball team. So I think Silver Creek is entering a stretch where they've got Scottsburg tonight, BNL on the road on Thursday. They have Brownstown on the road on Saturday, Danville in a holiday tournament, Gibson Southern with Gabby Spink in a holiday tourney. I think they're still trying to figure out who they are. I am most interested to see how they defend, knowing that Bedford North Lawrence is a Spreen-centric basketball team. And what I mean by that is this. Does Brooklyn Wren trade an eye for an eye and guard the best player on the other basketball team? Or do they put Gant on Spreen, make her a driver, and keep Wren in the paint? I think that's the big decision that Scott's got to make. And Josh has coached against Bedford and Chloe specifically. The book on Chloe was that you would keep her out of the paint and make her shoot the 3. Well, it'd be interesting to see if you feel like she is shooting the 3 better. Maybe they look at this and say, hey, we got to stay connected to Spreen with maybe not a lesser defender, but Gantz, for example, and try to make her a driver into Wren, who has turned herself into an incredible shot blocker. I think that's the big thing coming into this. And I think that's the big thing to watch, as these two teams could potentially face each other down the road in a 1-game season in sectionals, to see how Scott really kind of matches them up. So, Josh, I don't know. In preparing for spring, do you think they go off book, and do you think they go with Gant?
See, here's the thing, okay? If it's a regular season game and I know that I'm going to see them again down the road, I'm not showing my hand on a regular season game. I would probably keep things pretty close to the chest. I don't want to put anything on film. I don't want to even have them even have an inkling of what we're going to do. Where we had success against BNL was we put our most physical player on Chloe and made her earn everything. And then we would put a really long defender, kind of like a Brooklyn Wren type player, and we would put them on a non-shooter. So when Chloe would get to her spots, she would have a 6-footer with really long arms waiting for her. But like I said, I would not be showing that during the regular season. That's just me. But it will be interesting because both of these teams are very, very good, but they don't have a top 25 win yet. Like if you go to John Harrell, he's got that column. He's got the top 25 wins. Neither team has a top 25 win yet this season. So this is a measuring stick game, I'd say, for both teams.
I think another thing too, maybe a changing of the guard, just to kind of have fun with this thing a little bit. Brooklyn Wren also has Emma Shane on our basketball team, who's another really gifted 26. I mean, she shoots the heck out of the basketball. And there's going to be life after Chloe Spreen, and there's going to be life after Julianne Woodard, and there's going to be life after the class of 24 with Booker and Ane at Center Grove. And I know the Josh is really close to obviously the senior class at Franklin. They might be the next dominant South team in the South, below the city, of course. But having said that, I think it'll be interesting to see if Bedford North Lawrence can maybe delay that and give them their parade maybe after graduation.
Will Silver Creek move down to 3A after this year? I know they're up because of success factor, so I'm wondering. I asked that question assuming that you guys have enrollment numbers.
Yeah, but I think it's every 2 years they revisit that, right? Yeah. And I know, and isn't also now this is another pod, but aren't they also considering changing the classes based on enrollment as well?
I think they are.
Like for example, Roncalli volleyball might move down to 3A next year.
I think they are doing that because I was talking to Roncalli the other day actually, and they talked about that. That's something we should discuss on another pod. But yeah,
definitely,
that's all going to be changing here. So it's going to be some different looking classes here.
Yeah, but if I'm Silver Creek, I'm just playing this straight up. I'm just doing. This is what we do. I'll save the Jordan rules, the Spreen rules for the tournament.
Yeah. How much of that do coaches do over the course of a year? Like, do you look that far down the road? Because I don't think that would happen probably until regionals or semi-state.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. 100.
Scott and Jeff are going to be looking at that. Yes.
Yeah. Like, so whenever we played Center Grove, like we knew that those were always going to be a dogfight, very low possessions, very low scoring. So anything that we were going to do that was exotic, we always would save because they're so well coached and they game plan so well. They're watching every film, every game. They're sending scouts to the games. Like they're trying to get signals. They're trying to get our baseline out of bounds. So I'm not showing them anything until we get to the tournament.
Another game that's coming up this weekend, Lawrence North at Center Grove. Danny and I did a special little post-game show last Thursday following the LNLC game. Congratulations to Lawrence Central, by the way, for winning the Marion County tournament. So let's jump in now on how Lawrence North bounces back. I think they play Warren Central tonight. Then they go down to Center Grove, which has not lost since that Franklin game. They're at 10-1. Lawrence North at 8-2. I'll just open-ended. What do you guys make of this one?
Yeah, I'm going to be the Debbie Downer here. If you are Steven, you're more worried about Warren Central than you are
Oh, for
Center
sure.
Grove.
Yeah.
It's a conference game. You have to get that game. And unfortunately for them, in less than 24 hours, they have to go on the road and play a top 10 team in Center Grove who has 3 days of practice to prepare for you. So I think John Harrell has it. LN's a 4-point favorite, but I would actually give the advantage of Center Grove just based on what I just said. Like, they're not going to have time to game plan for Center Grove. They got to go play them in less than 24 hours. Warren obviously is the big game. Center Grove, they're going to know every single blob, every slob, every set play because they got 3 days to get ready. And Center Grove is an experienced basketball team. But, LN's got some dogs. And I am sure once that ball gets thrown in the air, they're not going to be thinking about Warren Central and we're tired and all this and that. Like, they're going to be ready to play. Organized chaos will be ready to play.
One quick correction. Yeah, as Josh mentioned, just so I could set the record straight, Friday versus Warren Central, Florence North, and turn around Saturday and play Center Grove. Danny?
Well, even after Center Grove, Brownsburg, if Avery Gordon plays, Norwell, who just knocked off number 1 Columbia City, Lawrence Central is looming, and then they have Hamilton Southeastern also. So Lawrence North has a ridiculously difficult schedule. They will be battle tested, to say the least, going into sectionals. But I ran into Bruce Harris, who was Talia Harris's dad. Ty Harris, one of the greatest players in Indiana high school basketball history, went on to South Carolina and in the league with Dallas. I ran into him, and he's really close with a lot of those players at Lawrence North, and he said they are a wreck. And this was at the Noblesville Fishers game, so this was Friday night, just a day removed. This is a long break, and Thursday to the Warren Central game. In AAU, if you don't play well at 11, you play again at 6 o'clock. In high school, you have these weeks where you have to wait to get back out on the floor, and that's the best way to move forward, and that's the best way to forget about. I mean, to revisit this and way too soon to scratch the wounds here for Lawrence North, but they gave up a 9-0 run in the last 80 seconds of that basketball game to lose the Marion County tournament. So I'm anxious to see the Warren Central, Center Grove, and just moving past Lawrence Central and just getting past it and seeing some positive things. I said on that little special that we did after the Lawrence North game that there's championship metal here. That's going to be tested. If they come out flat, that's going to be Stephen Thomas's, I think, biggest thing. And that's all abstract. That's not stuff on the floor. That's not ball faking. That's not spacing. That's not rotations. That's not help and recover. That's not the basic concepts and fundamentals of basketball. That's more of an abstract thing. But that's for a team that has championship level expectations. I think that's going to be Stephen Thomas's biggest thing. And unfortunately with Center Grove, they are the perfect team to take on a team like Lawrence Central and Lawrence North because they're just so good at executing game plans. They're so smart. Josh talks a lot about, decision training. Those kids make great decisions. Booker and Ane they've been playing high school basketball, I feel like now for 6 years. And so I'm interested to see Lawrence North in kind of the bounce back. I think Center Grove, is going to be fine either way, because I think if they lose the basketball game to Lawrence North, to say that they can't come back and beat Lawrence North again with a different game plan, I think is irresponsible for us to say. So I think I'm more interested to see the bounce back game with the Wildcats.
I think the time off. I think losing Thursday to some extent is maybe a bit of a blessing in disguise for Lawrence North, because they played such a difficult front end of the schedule, and like you mentioned before, it's only going to get tougher from here with LC still going, Center Grove. I think HSE too. Whatever. You get a week there to practice, relax, recharge, tighten up things that you need to, and install some different things you've been working on. Like, you finally have a chance to breathe a little bit and work on some things. Whereas, if you lose Saturday in the semifinals, and it's just kind of like a wash of a weekend, if you lose in the semifinals, obviously, So I think there's some upside to some extent with Lawrence North getting that time off. But to your point, Danny, I suppose there can be some rust too. And looking at the game itself between Ellen and Center Grove, it's interesting because it's obviously an important game for both teams, but it doesn't feel like a must-win necessarily for either side. Like I feel like we have a fairly good grasp on both teams. It's just interesting to see how they fit in against each other because going back to the topic we had before, there's a good chance, a chance at least. I shouldn't say good chance because it's at sectional lines and it's difficult, but this could be a semi-state matchup here in a couple months again.
This game's bigger for Center Grove than it is Lawrence North. I feel like Lawrence North, like their schedule's so hard that they will be battle tested. Like Center Grove schedule's tough, but they also have those like games kind of woven in there where you can, have a bounce back spot, or hey, we're gonna try some things offensively, or maybe we're gonna extend our bench a little bit for this game. Like when you're Lawrence North, I feel like you don't have a lot of games like that. Like you're playing top teams night in, night out. So I definitely think this game is important for Center Grove because, like I said, they're going to have more time to prepare. They'll be ready, for LN. I'll tell you what, this is also a game for me. If I'm coaching Center Grove, I want to play through Wirtz early because I do feel like if your goal is to get beyond regionals this year, she's going to be the one that's going to have to get you there. And once she starts establishing herself inside early in the games, that's just going to open up for all the shooters like Ane and Grant and Bischoff. So I think it's a big game for Center Grove.
Yeah. Let's see. There's a big game tonight with Lapel Eastern Hancock. As we're recording this on a Tuesday, I suppose we can at least just mention that game. Interesting stretch here for Lapel, which has Hamilton Heights coming up, and then I forget they have another big game before this week is over. We saw Eastern Hancock go through their stretch of tests where they beat Cathedral. They beat, North Decatur by a point in overtime. So they're kind of getting to the stretch of being, pretty battle tested. Mackenzie Kosh has been playing out of her mind. I think she's put up 20 points in back-to-back games now. Probably need another big one from her tonight against the Lapel team that's been, looks every bit the part of a state championship contender again this year. What else are you guys going to be looking at here over the next week?
I think tonight's basketball game is really fascinating because Eastern Hancock has state championship expectations. They were knocked off by North Knox last year with Lexi Primus, who actually, I think they played Bedford North Lawrence, I think in Bedford I think they just lost by a point. So that's a really good basketball team, but they just beat their first 4A team. So, coached by Lisa Finn, who will use this as an opportunity to shout out congratulations to Coach Lisa Finn on her induction into the Indiana Basketball Hall of Fame. But albeit a down year for Cathedral, but Eastern Hancock beating a 4A opponent, it does kind of take the eraser to the asterisk. We have this feeling that maybe things are a little bit invalid if it's not 4A. Okay. And I didn't make that up. I didn't make up the rules. It is what people say. Tonight is a really good test. Lapel has 4A basketball. Like Lanaya Willis is a really good basketball player who looks great in a uniform, who's going to be a Division I talent, who has multiple Division I offers, plays on a monster AAU team. Like she's a brand name. I remember watching her in the state championship last year, and she's just everywhere when she plays for Lapel. She reminds me a lot of Taya Irvin, role player on the HSE state championship basketball team, but she's always seems like she's getting a rebound, throwing a good outlet. She handles the ball for him. She guards the other team's best player. She blocks shots. She deflects the basketball. She does a lot of those things. So to see Kenzie Cook and Lanaya Willis on the same floor in kind of an en vogue 2A matchup, I think is going to be really exciting. I'm excited to get over there and watch it.
And Maddie Pointer from Lapel, too, has been having an excellent year alongside her. And then Ruby White and Sammy Boulding. Sammy's a standout softball player. Ruby White really came on strong last year and is having an excellent career. So there's some depth to this matchup, too, just in terms of the players that they have there. And it's going to be a really fun small school basketball game. It's a good game independent of classes. I'm looking forward to seeing it. And, I don't know what to make of it. It feels like one of those coin flip games, but it has – it has, round 1 of 2 written all over it, honestly, as you look at it today.
If you go to that basketball game, I'll give you something to watch. Kaycie Cook is probably not going to be a collegiate point guard. It's probably not what she does best. But for Sherry Dowd, she plays point guard for Eastern Hancock. And there's always this fine line of, I got to go out and get mine. But as the point guard, you have this tacit responsibility to make everybody else on your team better. I think it'll be interesting to watch Kaycie Cook play a little bit out of maybe her projected collegiate position at point guard to see if she can make everybody else on Eastern Hancock better and try to make the sum greater than the individual parts.
Yeah. Eastern Hancock has Monroe Central right before Christmas, and right after Christmas to wrap up the month, they go to the Lawrence North tournament. So they'll get some really good competition over there. And then for Lapel, I have the schedule up now in front of me. They've played Alexandria. They've beaten Greenfield Central, which is a good one for them. The win over Alexandria was a good one, too. They beat North Central, a 4A school as well. And they go from Eastern Hancock, Monroe Central on the road, and then Hamilton Heights to close out the month of December on December 19th. So we've seen this stretch now for Eastern Hancock. Now we kind of see it a little bit for Lapel. Obviously, I think they were a little more balanced coming in. But this is kind of a interesting, let's see what you got kind of stretch for Lapel coming up here, too.
Yeah, and if you have championship expectations, like you want these iron sharpens iron games, because you when you get to the tournament, when you start making your run, you want to be able to have those experiences to draw from.
Absolutely. Speaking of Hamilton Heights, I wanted to touch on them quickly. They have that game coming up, too, against Lapel. They just keep on winning. They'll play West Lafayette here on Thursday night at home. Cam Runner, the Evansville commit, just continues putting up ridiculous numbers for Hamilton Heights. And they're an interesting team to see in 3A and to see and find out kind of if they're going to have that depth to go on another deep postseason run this year.
Camryn Runner is a really fun basketball player to watch. She has kind of maybe a neon green light, the way that maybe a Kate Clark does. She's just trying to get volume. But there's one particular play. I saw him play at Noblesville earlier in the year. And Noblesville had a student section there, and it's right on top of the floor, and the students are standing on the front row. And Camryn was definitely hurting Noblesville late in that basketball game. She hit a 3 and just kind of spun around and kind of stared at the students in the front row. I thought there's some stuff to that kid. And I've always really, really liked basketball players that just kind of have that, I'm saying stuff. I mean, I think you guys know where I'm going with this, but there's some stuff to Camryn Runner, and she's a really fun basketball player to watch. If you haven't seen Hamilton Heights yet, you're probably good to go and see Camryn Runner get a 30-piece, because she is really electric and she can really score the ball.
We had her
definitely not just one of the best teams in 3A, but one of the best teams in the state. I mean, if you look at their schedule and who they play, you got to feel really good about them moving forward.
They beat Jennings County early in the year, kind of a trademark win for them.
Definitely
kind of came up short in that Noblesville basketball game and some other ones too, but they've got some W's in there.
My favorite Camryn Runner story, we spent most of our time together on media day talking about this, is that she just sort of picked up golf on a whim and joined the high school golf team in the fall. And they went out and won the first regional, or they qualified for regionals for the first time in school history or something like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah. She's a fun kid to talk to, fun kid to get to know, a lot of character.
Well, I like her less now because I work really hard at my golf game. And so if she's just picking up a golf club and winning a regional, that's unfortunate for people like me, I guess.
Yeah. Just an incredible feat. I mean, it's not like, I picked up a football and decided to join the football team or the basketball team or whatever. Can't do it. I mean, it's golf, which you can work at for your entire life and still be no good at it. It's from experience. I think we touched on everything. I know there's some big small school games coming up. Lanesville, as I scurried to pull up their schedule, they play Crawford County in a highly ranked matchup between 1A, 2A school. Lanesville, the top ranked team in Class A. They have a really nice player in Hadley Cross here, among others. Anything else that you boys wanted to touch on game wise before we bolt?
I will be completely remiss if we didn't spend a couple of minutes on Kaycie Warfel. She's putting together one of the singular, most notable seasons now. I mean, she scored 40 against HSE when they were a top 3 basketball team. And I was at that game, and I'm going to be honest with you, I didn't even know she had 40. But I've seen that team 3 times now. I've seen them against Fishers. Well, I've seen them 3 times. Okay. And Pike was the other one and Fishers. And this kid's relentless. Okay. And she attacks the basket like none other. When she gets north and south, she is very difficult to stop. And a little side note here. Okay. But the person that does the play-by-play, I think his name is Dawson. So I was watching the Pike Pendleton Heights game, and it seemed like a professional that was doing it. And then I went to the HSE Pendleton Heights game, and the people that were doing the game were sitting right next to me. And I actually asked them, I was like, hey, did one of you guys do the Pike game? I felt like I was listening to Fox Sports or FS1 or Big Ten Network or something like that. And they were like, well, yeah, that must have been, I think his name is Dawson. Somebody please like send it to me. I'll retweet it. But this kid's a professional. He's the most talented person in the gym every time. But he was talking about how he won state, by the way, for play-by-play. If that's a thing, apparently it is. But he said Kaycie Warfel is now adding a 3-point shot to her repertoire. Okay. And if she can shoot the 3 with proficiency, I think these 30 and 40-point basketball games is going to be commonplace for her because it's almost impossible to stay in front of her. But she's a really, really fun basketball player to watch. Pendleton Heights as a team is a really, really fun basketball team to watch. They have a kid by the name of Ada Hupford, who's in the 27 class, who when we see kids like Avery Gordon pass, she's going to be, the starting 5 for Indiana high school basketball. Like she's there and she's a little bit more mobile. And she had a couple basketball games where she's hit some threes, guards out on the perimeter and switches. But go watch Pendleton Heights. Go watch Kaycie Warfel. She's a lot of fun.
Yeah. The way that she goes in too, like she's zero fear whatsoever. And I talked to her after the Mount Vernon game and just playing through contact. Like she got banged up in that game, but she said she's liked it a lot more than what she was expecting to. Playing through contact, having to fight through inside and that sort of thing. It's cool because I first saw her when they upset Fishers a couple of years ago, right before the Mudsock game. And it's been cool watching her game develop last year, into last year. And then this year is kind of like you're starting to see that well-rounded product here as a junior, and the sky's the limit for her. And her older sister, Whitney, was a great player too for Pendleton Heights.
Yeah. And I'll just finish it up here. Like I just wanted to congratulate the Hall of Fame class of 2024. So we got a list of names here. I think it's like 12, maybe 14 names. So I'll go through these pretty quickly, but pretty awesome. I think, Lisa Williams Burgess, we have Marilyn Cottons, Christina Eschmeyer, Lisa Finn, Tara Lynn Johnson, Joe Lentz, Rick, it looks like Marshane, I think, Jill McFarland, Melinda Miles, Melissa Miles, Jeanette Mosier, and Nan Tulichinski. Just an amazing honor. I mean, their body of work, whether it was players, coaches, pretty awesome. So congratulations to those 2024 Hall of Fame inductees.
Good stuff. Well, I think that does it. We got it in right over an hour, so we did good. We had some good takes, some good discussion. We'll be at plenty of games this week. We'll have a show again next week to get us into the Christmas holiday, and we'll figure things out from there. But we thank you all so much for listening. For Courtney, Josh, and Danny, I'm Brian Henson, and we'll talk to you again next week.